everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. Joe Moore here, coming at you from Breckenridge, Colorado. Today on the show, we have Leah Mix. Leah is a very influential person in the psychedelic space, founded a lot of really important organizations in psychedelia, and is an LMFT with some really interesting big insurance company experience. So I hope you all learn a bunch from this one. There's a lot of conversation about unity and what are we actually trying to do here with some of these different projects that are underway, and how can we come together to make meaningful change before things kind of get really concretized in a framework that we don't necessarily love. So I think that's it for the intro. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you to Leah for coming over and doing this one in person. And I hope we can do more with Leah in the future. All right, everybody, have a beautiful rest of your day. Enjoy this episode and see you on the other side.
Vital, our 12-month certificate in integrative psychedelic studies, is back for its fourth cohort starting September the 17th, 2024. Vital is a process-oriented course with a deeply multidisciplinary curriculum that incorporates clinical, scientific, and relational domains alongside indigenous, shamanic, and transpersonal wisdom traditions. Vital is a vibrant community of students and alumni from around the world committed to merging powerful inner work with expanded professional scope of practice. Through lectures, study groups, webinars, elective modules, process papers, and online affinity groups, you'll have all the support you need to develop your own vision and model for lifelong growth in this exciting field. And new for this fourth round of Vital, we've introduced the option of choosing one of 5 specialization graduation pathways, which are regenerative business and leadership, depth and Jungian perspectives, somatics and trauma, spiritual emergence, or microdosing. Applications for Vital are open until August 23rd, with early bird discounts of $2,000 available until July 22nd. So we invite you to apply early to improve your chances of being accepted into this global community of the next generation of psychedelic-informed practitioners. Head to vitalpsychedelictraining.com to learn more about this transformative journey, download our full course curriculum, and to apply. Best of luck, everyone.
All right, here we are, Psychedelics Today, recording on June 16th, 2024 with Leah Mix. How are you?
I am so well, Joe. I'm really happy to be here with you.
Good. This is really great. And we get to do it in my living room, which is wonderful.
It is. It is a wonderful living room.
Thanks. I had almost nothing to do with it. So that's great. All right. So today we're going to talk about you. We're going to talk about the recent FDA advisory committee meeting. We're going to talk about the future of psychedelics in medicine, how we might be able to unify to bring psychedelics into their best fruition in the medical field. So let's first talk about you. You're a therapist?
Yeah,
LMFT?
I am. I'm a family therapist by training, and I spent the first half of my career primarily in community mental health. So homeless populations, chronically mentally ill, that's a lot of foster care. And then after I did 12 years of direct service, I actually navigated to working in the system itself. I really could see family therapies based on systems theory, and I'm a systems thinker. That is definitely how my mind works, and I was fascinated with how the system, the healthcare system, legal system, all these different interacting systems, but primarily the healthcare system was holding a lot of the suffering in place that I was trying to treat clinically. So my choice was to actually jump in and work inside the system itself. And I'm happy to tell you a little bit about that. And
let's go a little bit further into that. So when you say that, it makes me think Washington, D.C. or like state level organizations. But how did that play out for you?
Yeah, what that looked like is working 15 plus years in the commercial health insurance industry. And I developed an expertise in actually bringing new behavioral health clinical specialties, helping them come into the healthcare system and then to be covered by health insurance.
Right. We talked about this the other day. This is awesome.
Yeah, it was a very unique experience, and I'm super grateful for it because you get to really look at all of these. You get to look at how the machine works and then really use it actually to help people have more access to care. So doing that at scale and impacting directly 20 million covered lives and indirectly eventually impacting the entire commercial market of 250 million. There's a lot that goes into that. Everything from helping code claim systems, developing medical policy, building provider networks, all the way up to crafting legislation. A lot of these healthcare plans are regulated at the state level. And so you want to make sure that the legislation is properly aligned for there to be access.
So just really, if you could do like a really quick overview, I think you mentioned something about autism coverage and could you kind of like do a high level on that for us?
Yeah, sure. So that is something that I'm incredibly proud of. And of course, I was working with many people in what I share. But the treatment for autism, the most evidence-backed treatment for autism is called applied behavior analysis. And when I started working in the health insurance industry, there was almost no coverage for this treatment. Now, the issue with that is that it's extremely expensive. It's about $40,000 to $80,000 per year per child for an average of 6 or 7 years. So it's like, what family can afford that? And at the same time, you need to catch developmental windows so that a person will be more functional in their life. So you have this huge moral conundrum. These children who have autism, if they can benefit from, it's called ABA, they need to get it as soon as possible. And so moving the needle on going from almost no coverage for applied behavior analysis, and within 5 years, we were able to accomplish almost complete coverage in the commercial markets. And of course, that was a combination of working for one of the largest insurance carriers and then seeing how the market dynamics actually can work to push coverage into the market, right? So you can get, for example, one of the things we saw is executives in the tech industry moving from one company who wasn't covering applied behavior analysis for their child to a different company so that they could have that coverage. And that started the self-funded groups, so the Googles of the world who pay for their own healthcare benefits. That started a rush, actually, to cover these treatments. That's one of multiple types of market effects that you can induce to get coverage moving when needed.
So that price tag that you mentioned should give people in the psychedelic space a lot of hope. I hope you all heard that story. So I assume you had some interactions with a bunch of people in government at that point then, right? You kind of mentioned that earlier. So you started developing a few relationships at that point?
Well, when I was working inside of the insurance industry, the primary interface with the government was through our lobbyists. That's how it's done. And as you know, I've gone on to work with the federal government, Department of Health and Human Services, and so forth. That came subsequently, and after I came into psychedelics. And I'll tell you, I knew nothing about psychedelics until they found me, and that was in 2014.
Well, let's talk about that. They didn't like just sneak into your house, right? What happened?
Well, it was kind of a side door, yeah.
Mhm.
And what happened is I was so fortunate to have an experience of having MDMA-assisted therapy. And I had been trying to treat longstanding childhood trauma for decades at that point. Tried all of the things. And then I was seeing somebody, well, long story short, the experience was one session of MDMA-assisted therapy was a liberation from what would be called CPTSD. And when we hear stories of vets coming back from war and they have serious PTSD and then they're liberated from it, it is a very distinct experience. So my PTSD was developed over the course of my childhood. And we know from like the work of Dan Siegel at Stanford that when a child is exposed to violence while their nervous system is developing, it affects brain development, it affects nervous system development, right? And so I was living with all of those symptoms. I had this session with MDMA-assisted therapy, and I finally feel like I can relax. I finally feel like the experience was, I knew it. This is me. Thank God. And it was a liberation. Now, at that time, I was already helping to bring other behavioral health treatments into the healthcare system and get insurance coverage. So my experience was this collision of my personal growth path and my career path, because everyone who can benefit from MDMA-assisted therapy, from psychedelic therapies, should have safe, affordable access to them. That's what I do for a living. So the way that I experienced it, because I didn't know anything about psychedelics, it was like hippies dancing around in tie-dye somewhere. There's nothing wrong with that, but I don't know how we go from that to insurance coverage for psychedelics, right? So I just entered into a prayer, and I'm still in that prayer today. And the prayer is, how can I be in service?
So was this the bridge that kind of brought you to the CIIS program, or did you find some people that suggested you come to that program?
So what happened is there started to be an unfolding of events that I really felt were not I wasn't fully orchestrating them. I decided that the first thing that I would do related to psychedelics, my very first thing was I would go to this book talk by someone named Bia Labate at this Women's Visionary Congress in Santa Cruz. So I drove there, and
did that feel weird to
yeah.
What is that? Okay, I guess I'm going.
Yeah. Oh, totally. I was just like, okay, I'm just going to go and quietly sit in the audience. Yeah. I have no idea what I'm getting myself into here. And it was amazing. I met Ann Harrison, Annie Oak. I met Bia and her parents. I met Maria Mangini, who's an elder in the field. And I met Janice Phelps. How I met Janice Phelps is as I'm quietly sitting in the audience before this thing begins, Janice Phelps stands up and she says, if there are any therapists in the audience, I just want to let you know that we are starting at CIIS the first training program, above ground training program for psychedelic therapists. Please come and talk to me if you're interested in this program. And I just kind of looked up at universe and I said, okay, you're just going to spoon feed it to me like that. So I spoke with Janice that evening and I told her what I did, and she asked if I would come do the program. And I did, which was my first experience of a psychedelic community, the first year of the CIIS program. And what was really interesting about this, Joe, is that if you've never experienced a psychedelic community and you step into one, you notice that it's different. There's something different here. And what I came to understand was that what was different is that there's a few degrees greater psychological safety in psychedelic communities. People's nervous systems are more regulated. So your nervous system is registering less threat, right? This is my understanding of. It's taken me a few years to figure that out, but that's definitely what it was. And I just knew that I wanted more of that in the world. That is what we need. When we can regulate our nervous systems better, we'll have more access to our prefrontal cortex, our creativity, our ability to collaborate and to solve problems together. It's really where we're trying to get. So I was so blessed in that first year to develop incredible mentorship. Started Amy Emerson was my mentor. I met Bob Jesse and many other recognizable names in the field that year. And one of the things that I noticed as I sat in the classroom and there was all of, the science and the spirit and all of this being woven together, was there was no discussion about how we were going to bring this into the healthcare system. And that was concerning. And also, I started to talk about it. And started to that the first year, I just started to try to educate the field about what needed to be done to bring psychedelics into the healthcare system. To launch a new clinical specialty into the healthcare system is no easy task. You have to set up multiple different nonprofit entities so that the field can be recognized by the incumbent system and be covered by health insurance. The FDA is just the beginning. And we do want to get into talking a little bit about what just happened at the FDA. But I'll just finish by saying a little story. So in order to do this really well, you have to set up things like a professional certification board that's nationally accredited, right? You've heard of board certified MDs. You need that for your own field. That's a consumer protection entity. You have to set up a professional association that sets standards, ethics rules, clinical practice guidelines, et cetera, deals with medical malpractice insurance. That's the club that everyone belongs to, that builds consensus and leverages collective bargaining power in the incumbent system. So those two things are essential for a new clinical practice. And I started to talk about these things and just did that for a while. And everyone seemed to think that it was very important and it sounded good, but nothing was happening. And I remember one day going to a mentor of mine and saying, these things I know that these things need to be done if we're going to bring this into the medical system and if we're going to get insurance coverage. And am I being asked to do these things? Because it's not happening. I'm trying to explain to people what needs to happen. And he just looked at me and he said, "Sorry, kiddo." And I cried about it. And then I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. So my work in the field has included helping to launch with, in steering committees, right? This is not me doing these things. This is a collaborative effort with the field, which it must be. So launching what is now the Board of Psychedelic Medicines and Therapies, BPMT, which is the certification board, APA, the American Psychedelic Practitioners Association, and Enthea, which was at the time a nonprofit insurance company, to help set the market conditions for psychedelic therapy to be covered. And what happened was, after we launched coverage for psychedelic therapy with Dr. Bronner's, I was approached by the Department of Health and Human Services. And that's when I set up my current firm, Delphi.
That's great. So BPMT, that would be the group doing certification, like board certified XYZ. So you would be board certified physician in this, or psychiatrist in this, and therapists in this. So it would cover like therapists and psychiatrists or others as well.
Yeah, that's such a great question. So how we designed it was for there to be, it was incredibly intentionally designed. There is intended to be a licensed track and a non-licensed track, or what in the healthcare system would be called a technician track. So the board would decide what are the criteria to sit for the exam. And people who have different types of licensures could sit for the licensed track, right? And then when you have a technician track, what's really great about that is you can diversify the types of practitioners who are working in the field. So it'll be much more likely, for example, that an African-American participant or patient would have access to an African American practitioner sitting in the room with them. And we know from the work of Monica Williams and so forth that it is very possible that culturally reflective care could be a clinical safety issue. And so if you are a BIPOC person, it would probably be preferable to be able to have access to someone who is reflective of your background or any person's background, right? We need to serve the community and the population that is very diverse. And so when you're able to do that and you have other fields where that license track and then having a technician track, that is accepted in the medical system and it is reimbursed by insurance. What's really nice is if you have a board like this that's setting the exam, that's ensuring people have a certain degree of skillfulness. They have to demonstrate that, right? This is a consumer protection entity. Someone can make a complaint to that certification board against a practitioner who has that certification. And also, very importantly, payers, healthcare payers. So on the commercial and government side, the Uniteds, Aetna's, Medicare, Medicaid can actually look to that certification to build their networks. They can say, these people have the appropriate training. Now we have a unified standard and we can identify who is competent to carry this work by that credential. You can even have scenarios, and this did happen with ABA, where that credential is written into state law as this is the credential that a person needs in order to practice and be reimbursed and so forth. And what's really wonderful about that is it is the field itself that is designing that criteria. It's not a regulatory body that really doesn't know about psychedelics, doesn't understand the nuances of psychedelic harms, potential harms, and benefits, right? Can't necessarily evolve the way that we will need to evolve as soon as we start to understand more things like what Matt Baggett was talking about the other day. We need a lot more research about what different types of therapies work well with psychedelic therapy, what doesn't work well. All of that needs to be brought back around into like a Kaizen process where we're continually improving the field. And we also need to ensure, I'm speaking specifically about the certification board, that there is the highest degree of ethics that's being upheld. There's the highest degree of competency. And if someone is in violation of that, you have a board entity that understands how to evaluate that. State licensure boards currently would have no idea how to properly assess if someone was actually harmed or how they were harmed in a psychedelic therapy experience. So this is just one example of, not sure how we went on that long thing, but I think it's a really good example, of the things that are underway that need to be accomplished in order to do things like assuage the advisory committee of the FDA. I think we really want to talk about that for a minute and what everyone is not talking about. So you and I have had this conversation, Joe, that the thing that folks are not talking about that was operating in the room on June 4th during the FDA advisory committee is fear. Fear was operating in that room.
Let's talk about what the meeting was first. So
Right.
What was the advisory committee meeting?
So the advisory committee meeting is a process, and I'm not an expert in FDA regulatory process. So
Go listen to the Matt Baggett piece if you want some technical details on what was going on there.
Yeah, it's a very normal process for the FDA to gather a collection of basically representatives of stakeholders in public health, right? To learn about a new therapy and to weigh in on safety and effective and efficacy. Right? So this is what was happening on June 4th, and it's a very important meeting. The FDA tends to vote with the advisory committee 70 to 80% of the time. So they need to take this very seriously. Well, one of the things that we really need to understand is that you have a bunch of representatives from different stakeholder groups in the healthcare system and so forth, learning about MDMA therapy really probably they're very new to the process. They're very new to the therapy. And they're looking at the data, they're hearing about the data and so forth. And then they are hearing stories of people being harmed in psychedelic therapy. Now, being hurt when we are vulnerable, psychedelics put people into a vulnerable state. That is understood. Being hurt when we're vulnerable is a primordial fear. That is a deep fear. And so they heard a lot about how people have been harmed. And what they didn't hear was the field of practitioners showing up and saying, we've got this. We understand the harms. We understand how to help prevent them, how to identify them, and how to appropriately address them if they do happen. We have organized ourselves into bodies that are normal bodies that are recognized in the healthcare system, that provide consumer protection, that provide ethical oversight, that provide standards of care, that provide clinical practice guidelines, that cooperate with the incumbent systems, with the AMA, with the APA, with the state licensure boards, with the payers, right? These structures are in place. We've got it. We understand. The people who are expressing concern should be expressing concern. I think what's very important for the field to understand and the public to understand is that the advisory committee, this is a kind of a cakewalk compared to medical policy boards for any of the payers, their attorneys, their underwriters. This is the beginning of the scrutiny. And what they're asking us to do is step up and to reassure them. It is our job to reassure the public and the regulatory bodies and the stakeholders involved that we have this, we understand it, and we're going to come together, we're going to organize, and we're going to provide these consumer protections. So what we saw is a lot of talk about the things that could be talked about. Oh, the double-blind thing. A lot of things that are not even, they're kind of non-issues. They've actually been already resolved. But they were talking about those things because they couldn't talk about the main thing that was scary. There was one of the advisory committee members who put it very elegantly, and she said something like, the therapy is the greatest strength and the greatest liability. And that is the crux of the matter. So the question now is, how are we going to come together as a field and show up in a suit and tie, seriously saying, we as the field of practitioners understand, we know this, we've got this, and we will handle it just like every other area of medicine. Medical malpractice is an issue in every other area of medicine. This is no different. And so we are organizing ourselves in the way that every other area of medicine organizes itself in order to deal with these issues, which are particularly complex and nuanced with psychedelics. And we've been working on this for many, many years, and we can do it. So one of the things that I think has become a liability, we notice with this term that's being used, a therapy cult. Right? A therapy cult.
We've done some good work on cults on the show, by the way.
Oh, great.
There's some really great research on cults. I think the guy's name was Matthew Remski, created like a scale where you could actually measure just how culty is it. And he uses a more technical term called high demand groups, which I think helps inform how we want to think about cults, right? Like, but keep going here.
Yeah, no, it's a serious field of study. I mean, to your point, Joe, that's exactly right. So let's look at what a cult actually is. So a cult is an organization, right, that has a figurehead that is like making up the rules, right? And everybody is under the control.
Infallible. You can't question. You get asked to leave.
All of that, right? Now, if we're looking at psychedelic therapy and MDMA therapy as like MAPS, under MAPS control and Lykos's control, right, with a particular figurehead, that's where this cult thing starts to come into play. A very different view is this is the drug developer who is moving MDMA through the FDA, and you have a fully developed field of practice of practitioners that are external, that are independent, practitioner-governed, practitioner-led organizations that are not under MAPS yoke, that are not under Lykos's yoke or Compass or any of the other drug developers. They are independent bodies that can be influenced by their members, that can be influenced by public, right? This is the opposite of the occult. This is ethics, standards of practice, standards of care being held in a plurality of entities that are building consensus about what safe and efficacious treatment or effective treatment looks like with psychedelic therapy. So now you move away. This isn't healthcare. It's not an organization that's controlling all of this. No, this is a new clinical specialty that's being governed and managed by organizations of practitioners, as is normal in the healthcare system, and their relationship with regulatory bodies. So that use of that word, which we hear it coming up again and again, I think is indicative of the issue. I don't believe that MAPS is a therapy cult or that Lykos is a therapy cult or anything of that nature. But when you are an outsider looking in and what you're hearing are these harms happened, whether this stuff is true or not, that doesn't matter. What matters is that there is a normal bodies that are set up to actually evaluate that. There will be harms. We all know there will be harms in psychedelic therapy. I tend to believe that the benefits will vastly outweigh the harms.
Absolutely.
But that does not mean that we can avoid dealing with the harms. Actually, when the harms are raised and they have a proper body to go to, they have a professional association, they have a certification board, right? They have places where those harms that have been experienced can be expressed. We can learn. We can all learn and grow from that. There's no reason for any of that to be suppressed. It needs to be explored. And the person who's had the experience needs to be cared for. And the practitioner involved needs to be cared for. Sometimes that's going to involve some kind of punitive action. And then, of course, there's the whole other layer of what we want to be sure that the FDA is hearing is about post-market surveillance. You have an entity of the state of Colorado, Rocky Mountain Poison and Drug Services. This is a 60-year-old entity that does post-market surveillance for drugs. And they are very dedicated to tooling their systems for the nuances of psychedelics. And they just published an article in Nature Mental Health, which starts to outline some of how they're thinking about it, and they're taking on expertise from the field, but they sit outside of the field. This is the entity that the FDA and the regulatory bodies, the authoritative bodies, will be able to trust that the data collection, if it is put in place, the data collection and the analysis of the adverse events and the benefits of psychedelics are being assessed within an appropriate analytic structure, right? A data analytics structure. So that post-market surveillance piece also could have been something. I think that these are more commercialization types of concerns, but they are coming up sooner because of the therapy component. Yeah.
One thing we didn't really get into is that amazing line you had, like therapy being both really amazing here in this context and also like really problematic. And I think one of the issues is, just because we didn't name it here, the FDA doesn't have any oversight on psychotherapy. And I think that was perplexing for them to have to say, like, I don't know what you guys are doing. Like, this looks amazing. The data's great, but what's going on here? Like, what do you think the FDA was, thinking of this psychotherapy component?
Yeah. Well, first, I want to clarify that that line is inspired by a member of the advisory committee, right? And so someone who is representing the public looking at this for the first time, right? The FDA has been looking at this and working very closely with MAPS and LICOs for many years. So they might have a different perspective on it. So I think that the FDA has been, we've seen in the guidance that they've given about here's how to structure the therapy. They appear to be quite on board with therapy being a component and also understanding that they can't regulate that. But if I were in their shoes, very hopeful that the guidance that they're giving will lend to safety as this moves into the healthcare system.
I just wonder how firm. So you've well, you're not really an expert in this aspect. So like this whole FDA project, I always wonder how firm the decision is. But as you said, this is just the beginning. We have so much more to go through before we know really what this looks like in practice, and prescribability and things like that. Would you say that's a fair representation? Like you were saying earlier, we still have so much more left to do before we're seeing this deployed at scale and affordable rates.
Yeah. I mean, getting this through the FDA is the essential hurdle, but it really is the beginning of access, right? That's where we're all trying to get to. If people do not have access, safe, affordable access to these therapies at scale, like what are we doing, right? So I remember when you brought up about the FDA not regulating therapy, I wanted to give you like an imagine this. Sure. So on the timeline that we're on, we saw what we got. We got an advisory committee that was very fearful, not sure about the data, fearful about this, right? You saw the vote. And it was really quite negative. Now, that was the timeline where you really didn't have anyone showing up to say, we understand that these harms happen. We understand how they happen. We understand how to help as the practitioners, how to help prevent them, identify them, address them. So there is no counter to that. On another timeline, what happened in that advisory committee meeting was you had Nicole Buchanan, tenured African-American professor, executive director of the BPMT, the certification board, standing up and saying, we have set up a certification board to ensure public safety. This is a consumer protection entity. We will achieve national accreditation. That is the gold standard for professional certification boards. There are hundreds of these. And we will make sure that people who have this certification understand ethics, they are properly identified, and that there's a mechanism for these complaints to be dealt with properly. You would have had Lynn Marie Morsky of the Psychedelic Medicine Association, MD, JD. This is the woman who goes to the AMA. She goes to their conventions and represents psychedelics right? She's the interface of psychedelics facing out into the incumbent system, helping medical professionals who aren't necessarily psychedelic practitioners understand. This would have already been known. We would have already, that the advisory committee would have said, okay, clinical practice guidelines are on the way. We have PPGs, professional practice guidelines, which is a lower level of evidence. We have those underway, right? All right, you guys are on top of it. This is exactly what we need to see. You would have had leaders for a professional association that is member governed, like the AMA, like the APA, ethics codes, standards for the training programs, accreditation standards, right? Again, CPGs, PPGs underway, and the thousands of practitioners in this association saying, we will take responsibility. You'd have Andrew Penn, open nurses. We're with them. We've got this, right? We're working with our community of nurses. We understand these things. We are coordinating this all together. And then the real kicker is you would have Britt Rollins of the National Psychedelic Association saying, we're really focused on what's happening at the state level, but we understand there needs to be a unified code of ethics for any practitioner of psychedelic therapy. There is going to be the interface between medical treatment, right? The medicalization, healthcare, and what's happening at the state therapeutic use. People are going to flow back and forth between those things. We understand that, and we're setting standards for how that happens, and that any practitioner, if they're working with psychedelics with the patient understands consent, understands where to take a complaint. The practitioner understands what's in their scope, what's out, how to send somebody to another practitioner if something comes up that's out of their scope. This is all normal healthcare. And we have all of these things very close to being in place, but we're not quite there yet. And right now is the moment to really double down on coming together as a field and making these things happen, unifying as a field, creating coordination across these organizations, and being able to reassure the public and the regulatory bodies that we can do it.
Right. I could see the news cycle going so much better for, team psychedelic medicine if that kind of stuff was in place. And it's certainly tragic it wasn't there.
Well, I mean, we could put that spin on it, or we could say it's still there to do. We still have this to do. And now it is becoming more and more clear that this is ours to do. Do we want a world where existing bodies like the AMA and the APA, who really don't understand psychedelics, or state licensure boards who don't understand psychedelics, decide that, okay, well, now they have to do something about it? Or are we going to take responsibility? And I think now is really the time. Now, what I want to say about this is when I say we take responsibility, I do mean all of us. And part of taking responsibility, in my experience, means also recognizing our own shadow that we are bringing into this work. And that is true regardless of the role that we are playing. If we are an administrative person, if we are a clinical person, right? If we are a funder, if we touch this work in any way, there is a strong potential that our shadow will show up. And that is what we're being asked to resolve.
Let's talk about what is the shadow.
Sure. So as we know, MDMA therapy was really brought forward by, of course, Sasha and Anne Shulgin. And Anne Shulgin's contribution was about shadow. So these are the aspects of, I'll just talk about it on the personal level, the aspects of ourselves that are hidden from us, but they are often simply rooted in fear, right? the ways that we operate, that we're trying to navigate around fear. And in doing so, we are having unintended impact, often unintended impact on other people. Now, there are certainly people who are straight up malicious, and that is also a form of shadow. It's not really the field needs to absolutely be prepared for that and be prepared to address that. But how it occurs to most people, even people who outwardly appear to be engaged in malicious acts, is internally, people believe that they're doing the right thing. And that's what's tricky about shadow, right? And we see this operating inside of psychedelic therapy in the therapy room. And we see this operating in every other aspect of the field, just like it's operating out in society. So what we're being asked, I believe, is to be able to manage shadow. And that is must be a collective effort. Our own shadow is hidden from us. And I'll use myself as an example. So we have all kinds of folks coming into this work, people who are everybody has shadow, by the way. That is a part of, the human setup. And we have people coming into this field at various places and their healing process and so forth. And certainly I was one of these people. And part of my shadow, my experience is that when you come to work inside of psychedelics, it's not like, oh, it's going to be kumbaya and everything's going to be like easy and gravy. No. Actually, the opposite. You are going to be given probably some of the things that are your greatest fears, right? And you could be very hurt, right? Things could happen that could feel very hurtful. And your own way of dealing with fear will emerge. One of my ways of dealing with fear, based on my conditioning, is to shut down, is to stop speaking. And so in encountering things, in working in this field that really scared me, I stopped speaking. And that's why, as you know, Joe, like this is the first time that I've done a podcast, because even though I was focused on, trying to prepare the field, I couldn't raise my voice. I couldn't lift up my voice. And that is part of my shadow, because the fear is still there, right? Even if you're shut down and you're not speaking, where does that fear go? What happens with that fear, right? So I've been so lucky to be doing some really deep work, and I've discovered something very interesting about the nature of human suffering, nature of human healing. What I've discovered for myself is that when we are hurt, especially as adults, when we encounter things that hurt us, often those harms are actually laying down in the well-worn ruts of the harms that we have experienced in the past, right? It's scarring old wounds, right? And so if we take radical responsibility that it is me, I am having these experiences. These are my experiences to contend with. What am I going to do with them? What am I going to learn with them? How am I going to show up? How can I show up differently? I am so very grateful and blessed to be able to say that the discovery that I have made in my life is that when we decide that we are going to heal, that healing that happens can be so deep and so complete that we are actually more healed and more whole than if we had not gone through those difficult things. And so I'm telling you today that although I'm reporting I've experienced things that have hurt me deeply working in this field, that I am also more healed and more whole than I would have been if I wouldn't have gone through them.
Yeah. Powerful. Thank
But
you.
the only appropriate response for me at this point for all of the experiences that I have had and the people who seemingly, had some involvement is gratitude. I'm grateful.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah, it seems like a lot of us are going through the pressure cooker conveyor belt lately, and I've been thinking about it and sitting with it, and I think it's hard to have that perspective, but it's like this is for forming the diamond like later, that we need to kind of show up as.
Right? And really holding each other through that process, right? When we see uh, someone that we care about in pain, in fear, how can we hold them so that they can do that really deep work so that they can heal in a new way? It's like, I'm not going to pronounce this exactly right, but it's like the Japanese art of, I think it's called kintunzi. And this is where shattered pottery is reassembled using gold.
So pretty.
It's stunningly beautiful. And so when you come back together, when you have these things that shatter you, and you're held in love, and you're held in such a way that you can face the fear and really look it in the eye and start to evolve and grow into the next version of yourself, what comes out on the other side is so beautiful. And very importantly, probably can be in higher contribution to other people, right? And if you're working in this field, into bringing these medicines forward.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much here, and you're spot on about radical self-responsibility. One of the core tenets of the Burning Man Festival, if we're allowed to call it a festival. Anyway, did you have mentioned Mr. Dalio earlier? Did you have a line from him that you wanted to share?
Oh, it just relates. I could quote Ray Dalio all day. I think it was just one that I came across recently, which was the past is valuable in so much as what we can learn from it, right? So we can get wallowing around in the past and blaming people and all of that kind of a thing. But is that really useful? So your question or your statement of, was that tragic that we didn't show up, right? With our suit and tie and saying we've got this, was that tragic that we didn't show up to the FDA in that way? I don't really look at it that way. I say, okay, what's in the past is in the past, and what can we learn from that now so that we can move forward together better, more swiftly? And I think this conversation about shadow is really important.
Yeah, I think that's why it's really helpful to be in community with people, not to just be out hiding, especially if you're doing this psychedelic work. It's so essential. There's like a positive spin on shadow that sometimes we do, coming from Carl Jung's work. Ido Cohen, who's a Jungian psychologist we work with sometimes, he's great.
Yeah.
He talks about golden shadow, and that's a Jungian concept. It's like the positive sides of shadow that we don't always get. So
Great.
just there's so much material out there on shadow, everybody. Just want to make sure you are curious and dig into that whole concept more.
So there's something bubbling up. Actually it's a little bit a different note. But it is on this theme of posthumous analysis, right? Post-mortem, I guess, say analysis. When I look back at the evolution of these projects for the field, and I believe that there are some that I'm not specifically naming, so anyone who's involved with those projects, the Psychedelic Pharmacist Association is another one, and there are others. So I want to really
There's so many.
There's so many. So I just want to say I know that, and if you are involved in an organization of practitioners or otherwise helping the field to organize itself and to set these standards. Good on ya. Like, keep going. I think one of the things that I've looked at is how these initiatives have been financially supported. And they have been to some degree. And also, I think that when I look at things like how legislation is supported and how much time and effort and money is put into legislation that goes nowhere, or that is part of an iterative process, right? Okay, that didn't work. Now we're going to go back and try it again. We need to keep going. We need to keep trying, right? That is the same mentality that we need to bring to building the field for the healthcare system, right? We've got to keep going. Yes, it's going to be an iterative process. Yes, it's going to be messy. And we need to have a continual, strong flow of support that is not with the expectation of that this is going to go perfectly. It is with the expectation of we are going to keep trying. We're going to support in every way possible the people who are giving their time and energy to do this for the field. Right? It's a massive undertaking. We are going to protect them. We are going to care for them. We are going to help them carry it forward. And when things get messy, we're going to create a container that will carry out rupture and repair in the way that we need to see this happen for psychedelic healthcare in general. We have to be the example. We have to be actually doing these things and creating what we want to see in the world, what we want to see change in terms of how we take care of each other inside of these organizations. And it's going to be hard, and it's going to be messy, and it's going to be expensive. Yes, it is. Just like moving the needle on drug policy reform. Right? So if there is a good use of funds to help MDMA come through the FDA, come into the healthcare system, and actually be accessible, and then all of the other psychedelic medicines and therapies to follow, setting up these structures and making sure that they are given everything that they need in order to succeed is an extremely important use of funding right at this juncture if we really want this. And it is also the way, it's a very interesting thing in psychedelics, that if we ensure that everyone who can benefit has safe, affordable access to it, then the psychedelic tide, the rising psychedelic tide, floats all boats, right? Investors get their return, people become more healthy. It's a win-win all around. So this is how we do that if we are going to meet the incumbent healthcare system where it's at, and we're going to reassure the stakeholders that psychedelic healthcare is viable and safe.
And it's worth the initial gigantic investment. There's this long tail of beneficial things that can happen. Like we were talking about earlier, less CR visits. I think better health outcomes generally when we look at a bigger pool of people. I think we're just going to see longer lifespans and less healthcare required overall.
Yeah, when you start to cure mental illness, the benefits to society are enormous, enormous. It's really interesting. We were talking about this a little bit earlier too. So the way that the incentives of the healthcare system are currently structured, there's a pretty cause and effect stream whereby those who put in a lot of money for drug development, the bulk of the financial benefit flows directly back to them, right? A huge portion of that. Now, when you actually cure a disease, what you can have is a financial benefit that still flows back, yes, to the drug developer for sure, but then some of that value is more diffused into society more broadly, right? So less ER visits, less medical expenditures on all different types of illnesses, right? People who have a mental health condition are have 4 times more medical spend than someone who doesn't. Less child abuse, less substance abuse, less domestic violence, fewer children in the foster care system, right? People being more productive, more creative, more engaged, and more fun. I think this is going to be a lot more fun if we can have these therapies available and people. I feel a lot more fun than before when I was trapped inside of PTSD, which is a certain kind of, it does feel like a certain kind of imprisonment. At least that was my experience. And I think folks would resonate with that. So when we say the phrase, our liberation is bound together with others. For me, I can feel that viscerally. And I also carry a lot of urgency because my brother has severe PTSD from the similar things that I experienced. And he is a highly intelligent, wonderful, beautiful, sweet person who has all of these symptoms. And for like millions and millions of people, he will not be able to access MDMA-assisted therapy until it is legal. That will be his choice. And so I feel when we think about the people who can benefit from this, I feel very close to this. It's very close to home, quite literally. And so if there's anyone out there who is listening to this, who has a family member or they themselves are waiting for this to be legal so that one of their family members or themselves can have the relief of this therapy, I want to just tell you I am with you. I very much understand that. And I'm committed to doing everything in my power to help ensure that everyone can have safe, affordable access.
Big mission and a lot of work.
It's a we. But there's so many of us, Joe.
Yeah.
There's so many of us with good minds and hearts, and there's a tremendous amount of financial capacity if we're focused on what is essential right now, right? What is critical right now. For some reason, I feel really called to mention Sandor Iron Rope, who is a Lakota person who you introduced me to recently. And the issue of Indigenous reciprocity may seem like it doesn't belong here, but I believe that it does. So, for example, when we designed the certification board as having the technician track, what that can also mean is that people who are coming from Indigenous backgrounds would be more likely to be able to work in the field too. So you could have someone coming from an Indigenous background sitting in the same room as someone who's coming from a Western medicine background who are carrying this work together. And I really feel that the how is the what, right? Like how we solve for these things. We can take these things into consideration as we go. We're going to have a much better world and hopefully a more expeditious manner if we're focused on doing the right thing, right? And weaving that into the structures that can interface with the incumbent bodies.
Love that. As we're working towards wrapping up, anything else you want to try to include that we may have overlooked?
I just want to say how grateful I am to you, Joe. You have been carrying this mantle much longer than I have. And I've been working now in the field since 2016, I would say. I look across at you in this living room, and I can't imagine the journey that you have been on to help these medicines reach people, to help prevent people from being incarcerated for having access to these medicines, all the things that you have committed your life, your precious life to. I feel just a tremendous gratitude to you and to Psychedelics Today and to all of those who have been working in the field, especially our elders who have been carrying this at great cost to themselves for decades and decades. So I think that is really where I'd like to land it. And of course, a shout out to Rick, Lycos, Maps, and everyone who's working in different forms of drug development, also bringing this at the state level and through religious use. We really do need a full spectrum of access to this work, which I believe in very much. So just very grateful to be a part of this movement and to be able to contribute in the ways that I do.
Amazing. And there you have it, Leah Mix. I hope y'all liked that one. I certainly had a great time and learned a ton, and tend to agree full on with this one. It's really learned a lot, and I think we can all learn a lot from Leah's experience here. So how can we help the most people here in the best ways? And let's really, get together and talk about that and think about that and try to get a little bit more unity here in the space. All right. I think that's it for now. Thanks for tuning into Psychedelics Today. We will see you on the next episode. This is Joe Moore signing off. Bye-bye.